Hello and welcome. So today's video is all about the Hatuna Games and the Nykoping banquet. So the Hatuna Games wasn't actually a games, it was more like a coup, but they call it a games for some reason. But anyway, let's get into the video. So there were once three brothers. There was Berger, who was born around 1280, Eric, who was born sometime between 1281 and 1282, and there was Vladimir, who was born sometime between 1282 and 1285. When their father, King Magnus, died in 1290, Berger became King of Sweden at around 10 years old. So because he was so young, Berger obviously had a guardian who was Torgil's Knutsson. Now he effectively ruled Sweden while Berger was young. So Berger's coronation was actually in 1302, and at his coronation his brothers were made dukes. Eric was made Dukes of Svealand and Vladimir was made Duke of Finland. In 1304, Eric and Vladimir were made to sign this document saying that they would not conduct their own foreign policy in their dukedom. In 1304, Eric and Vladimir had to sign a document saying that they would not conduct their own foreign policy in their lands and that they would not appear at the royal court unless they were summoned to do so. So as you can guess, this caused a bit of friction between the brothers. So a civil war broke out between the brothers, though they did actually recognise Berger's son Magnus as the heir to the Swedish throne. But in 1305, Torgils was actually captured by Eric and Vladimir and imprisoned in Stockholm, where he was executed for treason in 1306. On the 29th of September 1306, Eric and Vladimir attended a wedding in Jalbo. On the way back from the wedding, they decided to pop in and see Berger. Now he formally invited them into his home. Tensions between the brothers had cooled a little bit by that point, so them popping in could have just been seen as wanting to just try and get on with each other again. But Eric and Vladimir did not actually want this. They captured Berger and his wife Martha of Denmark. And imprisoned them in the dungeons of Nykoping Castle. Their son Magnus was rescued by a courtier and he was sent to his mother's family in Denmark. Eric then took over the Swedish throne, but King Eric of Denmark attacked Sweden. The King of Norway then joined in on Denmark's side, so they were also attacking Sweden. In 1308, the brothers were forced by the King of Denmark to release Berger. So as part of the peace treaty that was drawn up for the release of Berger, Sweden was divided into three sections, with the brothers taking a third each. So Berger was still actually king of the whole of Sweden, but he was not recognised as king in either of his brothers' territories. So for 10 years, things were relatively okay between the brothers. They still hated each other, but they all decided to just keep the peace. But that was until the winter of 1317 to 1318 and the Nykoping banquet. On the 11th of December 1317, Berger held a Christmas party at Nykoping Castle, the place where he had been held prisoner by his brothers. And he invited both his brothers to the party. Now, Vladimir had already actually been to see Berger at the palace. He had gone there in the autumn and he was pleasantly surprised about how well he had been treated. Because of how well he had been treated, Vladimir convinced Eric to come along to the Christmas party. When the brothers arrived at the castle, they were greeted by Berger and he seemed generally pleased to see them. They were staying at the castle with Berger and his wife, but their retinue was not. They had been told that there was not actually any room in the castle for them, so they had to stay in the town. So after the party, Eric and Vladimir's people left and the gates were locked behind them. Everyone then went to bed, but actually not everyone went to bed. After Eric and Vladimir went to bed, the king's draught, who was responsible for administering royal justice, turned up with some crossbowmen and went into the brothers' bedrooms and handcuffed them. Apparently Berger was there while this happened, and while he was there, he was reminding his brothers about what they had done to him and his wife. He had them imprisoned in the castle's dungeons like what they had done to him and his wife, and they were tied to the walls with neck irons. So after being in the dungeons for 5 weeks, the brothers started to give up hope, so they drew up their wills. And it was soon after this that both of them died. Now, we cannot be sure about how they died. They could have either been murdered or they could have died of starvation. We don't really know. So Berger tried to reunite all of Sweden, but rebellions broke out in support of his brothers. It is said that when he realised that there was no hope, Berger threw the keys to the dungeons into the river. Apparently, a large medieval key was found near the castle in the 19th century. Berger and his wife fled, and first they went to the island of Gotland and then on to Denmark. Eric's son Magnus, not the Magnus who was named as heir before, a different Magnus, he was declared King of Sweden in 1319. King Birger died in exile in Denmark in 1321. So there's a little video about some brothers that really hated each other. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.